From the very beginning, it seemed like Dale Earnhardt was born with his hands on the wheel. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. Born on April 29, 1951, in the heart of North Carolina, Dale was raised in a world where the scent of motor oil was more familiar than the smell of fresh pies in the kitchen. His father, Ralph Earnhardt, wasn't just a race car driver. He was a legend on the short tracks of the South, a man whose fame echoed as loudly as the roar of his old Chevrolet. For Dale, racing wasn't a choice, it was destiny. By the age of 12, he was already sneaking behind the wheel of his father's car, not just driving back roads but hitting real tracks. Stories say he nearly outran one of Ralph's fiercest rivals. This wasn't a child's mischief, it was a sign. The boy was reaching for speed, for recognition, for a legend of his own. But the road to NASCAR was never as smooth as a perfect racing line. Ralph, despite his own past, was reluctant to bless his son's high-risk ambitions. He knew better than most, racing often takes more than it gives. Still, when Dale dropped out of school to dedicate himself fully to racing, Ralph let him go, not out of weakness, but because he recognized that same hunger for speed that had once consumed him. Dale's life always moved at full throttle, both on the track and off. In 1968, at just 17, he married Latane Brown. It seemed like young love could withstand even the doubts of worried parents. But the race for happiness was short. 1 year later, their son Carrie was born, but the strain of life quickly caught up to them. By 1970, the marriage had unraveled, unable to survive the turns of fate. Only a year later, Dale remarried, this time to Brenda G., daughter of famed NASCAR builder Robert G. It was a union between two racing dynasties. Together they had 2 children, daughter Kelly, and a son who would one day become a star in his own right, Dale Earnhardt Jr. But like his time on the track, Dale never slowed down, never looked back. He moved forward, even if that meant leaving behind people, relationships, and memories. As Dale's career gained momentum, his personal life became harder to keep out of the spotlight. His name echoed through racetracks across America, and behind every checkered flag and championship was not only courage, but solitude. In 1972, something happened that, in another context, might have felt theatrical. Father and son faced off. At Metrolina Motor Speedway, under the heat of engines and tension, Dale and Ralph lined up as competitors for the first time. This wasn't just a race, it was a symbol. The boy who grew up in the shadow of a racing titan was now challenging the very man who shaped him. This was the beginning of a story that would become legendary. Dale Earnhardt wasn't just a racer. He became the Intimidator, fierce, unrelenting, living inches from danger. But like all great legends, his story would be one of not just speed and glory, but also pain, loss, and an endless pursuit of victory, of recognition, and of something deeper within himself. On a warm evening at the Charlotte Speedway, the air trembled with the roar of engines. V8s thundered, V6s strained to keep up. But among all the races that night, one stood out. Not because of horsepower, but because of something far greater, the strength of the human spirit. It was the only time a father and son, Ralph and Dale Earnhardt, competed side by side. Rivals in sound, but bound by blood. Dale drove the weaker car that night, yet raced as if every turn were a test of honor. He wasn't chasing victory, he was chasing something deeper, something that had slipped away in childhood. Ralph, seasoned and sharp, began to close the gap. Dale caught a glimpse of that familiar silhouette in his rearview mirror and moved aside, a quiet gesture of respect. A son's tribute, but Ralph didn't take advantage. He stayed behind. Then came the taps. Once, twice. A gentle nudge to the rear bumper, not out of aggression but purpose. A silent message, loud as any engine. Don't give in. Don't yield. Not even to me. Ralph passed his son only at the very end, taking the win, but Dale walked away with something more. His father had shown no mercy, only truth, harsh, just, and as unyielding as the track itself. 1 year later, Ralph was gone. His heart, a heart that had carried speed, thrill, and worry for a son who still chased approval, stopped without warning. He was just 45, Dale was left shattered, hollow, but he kept driving. Alone now. For years, he chased something unfinished. Words never spoken, pride never voiced. It took time, but eventually, Dale knew. He had proven himself. To his father. And to himself. In 1979, when he joined Rod Osterlund Racing, Dale was just another rookie with a dream. But the season made things clear. A win at Bristol, for poles, 17 top 10 finishes, and Rookie of the Year, despite missing races due to a broken collarbone. He moved forward even when the road was lined with pain. 1982 brought hardship. A lone win at Darlington, the track famously called too tough to tame, lit up a season of darkness. 18 crashes in 30 starts. He didn't just break cars, he broke bones, including his knee at Pocono. But he never backed down. He never knew how. Then came 1987. And with it, the myth. At the Winston All-Star race, Dale showed the world who he truly was. Forced off the track, he didn't blink, didn't lift, didn't surrender. He tore through the grass and stayed in the lead. Returned. Endured. That move, later called the pass in the grass, wasn't technically a pass. But the legend didn't care. From that day, they called him the Intimidator, and the name fit. He was a hero and a target. After that race, an emotional fan sent a death threat to Dale directly to NASCAR's president. The FBI got involved. It was the price of greatness. The cost of being a man who wouldn't bend, not even before the speed of death. That was Dale Earnhardt's path. A path where racing wasn't just sport, it was language. The language of pain, pride, and memory. A language spoken between father and son. No matter how much we talk about speed, about the roar of engines, the flash of cameras, the thunder of the grandstands, the real race always happens within. Deep inside the heart, in the hidden corners of the soul, where not only the hunger for victory lives, but also fear, loneliness, rage, and pain. For Dale Earnhardt, racing wasn't just a sport. It was everything, his life, his prayer, his war. By the mid-80s, Earnhardt was no longer just a driver. He had become a symbol. His drive to win, relentless, unforgiving, nearly obsessive, was both inspiring and intimidating. On the track, he was a storm. Unpredictable, powerful, capable of altering the outcome of an entire race with a single move. But off the track, when the engines quieted, he was a man under pressure, exposed and constantly watched. The threats to his life during 3 consecutive races became so serious that federal agents were assigned to protect him. Thankfully, nothing happened. But the moment served as a chilling reminder. Earnhardt's passion didn't just ignite admiration. It provoked extremes. And yet, no chapter in his story carried as much pain as his long, bitter battle with what many called the curse of the Daytona 500. In 1986, it finally seemed like it was his time. He was on track for victory, locked in an electrifying duel with Jeff Bodine. But with 3 laps to go, fate intervened once again. A forced pit stop brought a flicker of hope, and then immediate disappointment. A blown piston handed Bodine the win and left Earnhardt empty-handed. From that moment, a shadow seemed to follow him. It was as if the track itself refused to let him win. In 1990, he led with confidence, almost with defiance. But on the second-to-last lap, a piece of metal debris sent his car airborne. The dream unraveled and he finished 5th. So close again. But Earnhardt never gave in. Even in 1991, when tragedy turned to absurdity, and a seagull collided with his windshield during the race. A random event, yet it cost him visibility, engine control, and ultimately the race. Still, he fought on. With 6 laps to go, he was running second. 2 laps later, his car betrayed him, spinning out in front of thousands of stunned fans. 1992 brought just 1 victory at the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte. Enough to keep going, but not enough to drown out the bitterness of what would become the hardest season of his career. 3 last-place finishes, 12th overall. For a man whose name had become synonymous with triumph, it was a crushing blow. Then came 1993. A new year, a new Daytona. Once more, he was in the lead. Everything was falling into place. 2 laps from the finish and Dale was ahead. But then, from the shadows, came another Dale, Jarrett. And in a heartbeat, it was not Earnhardt's name being written in the record books. It was someone else's. Once again, he was left alone on the track, not with the roar of victory, but with the silence of a dream slipping away. Earnhardt's story is not just one of wins and losses. It's a story of resilience, of a man who fought not only his rivals but destiny itself. And though the Daytona victory would remain elusive for years, no one could take from him what truly mattered. The respect, the legend, the unshakable spirit that never faded, even when the finish line always seemed just out of reach. He was never just a driver. He was the embodiment of unbreakable will, a living symbol of the American dream at full throttle. Dale Earnhardt, in his legendary black Chevrolet bearing the number 3, knew both the glory of victory and the sting of devastating defeat, on and off the track. His path was paved not only with trophies but with shattered glass, smoke-filled crashes, and pain too raw for words. There was a day when he led the Daytona 500 for the 4th time, only to see victory slip through his fingers yet again in the final laps. It wasn't just a loss, it was an old wound torn open by the roar of the finish line. Fans whispered of a curse, one that had haunted him for years. In 1996 and again in 1997, it showed its face, sometimes as a shadow, sometimes loud and cruel. Then came that day, Daytona 97. With 12 laps to go, the race exploded into chaos. A multi-car crash, twisted metal, screeching tires, and Dale Earnhardt was right in the center of the storm. Medics rushed to him, ready to load him into an ambulance. He was already inside, but then, like a legend refusing to die, he fought his way out. He saw that his car could still move, and he returned, back on the track, in a wrecked machine, battered inside and out, but with that same fierce, defiant gaze. He crossed the finish line in 31st place. To some, meaningless, but to him it was everything, a victory over fate, over pain, over fear. Just a year earlier, at Talladega, he had faced death again. His car, flying at nearly 200 miles per hour, slammed into the wall in a terrifying chain reaction crash. Rain interrupted the broadcast, and millions only learned of the wreck hours later. Footage of medics sprinting to the crushed vehicle spread across the country. Many feared the worst, but then he stepped out, bloodied, broken collarbone, fractured sternum and shoulder blade, and yet he stood, waving to the crowd as if to say, "I'm still here." He refused immediate hospitalization. A week later, he was back, racing in Indianapolis. Broken, but not beaten. That crash, along with the death of Russell Phillips and Charlotte, shook NASCAR to its core. It led to the creation of the Earnhardt Bar, a reinforced metal brace across the roof and windshield. It would go on to save countless lives. Sadly, not Dale's. He lived on the edge, not because he chased danger, but because that was the only way he knew how to live. Every race was more than a contest, it was a declaration of who he was. Against fate, against pain, against all odds. He was a man respected as much as he was feared. Not just a racer, but a living legend with a nickname that said it all. The Intimidator. Dale Earnhardt. His journey through NASCAR was a road paved with adrenaline, steel, grit, and pain. But even the toughest icons have their moments of vulnerability. 1997 was a turning point. That season, the relentless wheels of his racing fate began to slip. At Darlington, during the Mountain Dew Southern 500, something ominous happened. A sudden loss of consciousness sent his car helplessly crashing into the wall. In a daze, he kept circling the track, lost in a fog, until he finally made it back to pit road. Later, he revealed he had been seeing double. This wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was an internal alarm, a rare crack in the armor of a man who seemed unbreakable. But Earnhardt wasn't the kind to back down. On February 15th, 1998, after 20 grueling years of trying, he finally broke the curse. On his 20th attempt, he won the elusive Daytona 500. As he crossed the finish line first, the entire NASCAR world seemed to pause. Something monumental had just happened. His triumph was more than a win. It was redemption, long-awaited, hard-earned. As he rolled down pit road, crew members from every team, not just his own, lined up to shake his hand. One by one, they acknowledged the moment without words. "You earned this." And then, as a final stroke in this near-biblical scene, he circled the infield, leaving behind tire marks that formed a giant number 3. His number, a symbol of enduring presence. It seemed a second wind had taken hold. In the year 2000, he proved he still had the fire. After undergoing neck surgery following a crash at Talladega in 1996, he came back stronger. His victories sparkled like in Atlanta, where he edged out Bobby Labonte by a mere 100th of a second. And at Talladega, he unleashed pure magic, overtaking 17 cars in the final 4 laps. This was still the Intimidator, bold, relentless, alive. But speed always casts a shadow. On February 18th, 2001, Earnhardt took the green flag at the Daytona 500 with the quiet confidence of a man who had already faced his demons. Felt like his race. But everything changed in an instant. On the final turn of the final lap, he made slight contact with Sterling Marlin's car. The car turned. In just seconds, he slammed into Ken Schrader's vehicle, then careened headfirst into the wall at nearly 160 miles per hour. The force of the impact tore off the wheel assembly, and the hood slammed violently against the windshield. Dust, smoke, then silence. While Earnhardt's body was still inside the car, his son, Dale Jr., was charging toward the finish line, crossing in second place. In the shadows of their final lap, the crumpled remains of Dale's and Schrader's cars sat side by side, a haunting reminder. Even legends are mortal. He was gone, but the mark he left, etched not just in the grass or the asphalt, but in the hearts of millions, can never be erased. This isn't just a story about racing glory. It's the story of a man who fought until the very end, who stumbled and rose again, who believed, who dreamed, and who became the symbol of an era. When the race came to an end, the triumphant cheers were replaced by an eerie silence, as if time itself had stopped, and a bitter truth struck the hearts of everyone present. Schrader climbed out of the car without a scratch, running toward Earnhardt with hope that everything would be all right. But behind the car's window screen awaited something far worse than any fear, a motionless body shrouded in the darkness of despair. Schrader desperately waved his arms, calling for the medics who had just arrived at the scene of the crash. Yet deep down, he already knew hope was almost gone. At the hospital, the dreadful news was confirmed. Dale Earnhardt had died. His life was cut short by a fractured skull sustained when he hit the steering wheel, a blow destined to change everything. The NASCAR investigation uncovered a grim secret. One part of the seatbelt, the left shoulder strap, was broken. This could explain why Dale suffered such a fatal injury. Following this discovery, a storm of accusations and fears erupted. The seatbelt manufacturer began receiving threats, while journalists dug for the darkest details, photos and autopsy results. But the truth, as it often does, proved to be more complicated. The final investigation showed that the broken seatbelt was not the key cause of the crash. Fate had written its tragic script in its own way. Still, Earnhardt's legacy lived on and continued to inspire. He left behind more than just numbers, over 100 NASCAR Cup wins. He left the spirit of a racer who never gives up, even when luck seems to have turned its back for good. His son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., followed in his footsteps and achieved what once seemed impossible, winning the Daytona 500 not once, but twice, carrying on the family tradition. In the world of racing, you never yield to anyone, not even your own blood. This is a story of strength, passion, and pain that cannot be forgotten. A story about how behind every finish line lies a human drama, and how racers continue chasing not just titles, but the memory that burns deep within their hearts.